You're checking in with the doctor for the greatest fantasy baseball podcast in the world, starring your hosts, Dr. Fantasy.
I'm ready to rock and roll today.
And Rydawg.
Harrison Masturbator.
Welcome to Doc and Dog, your fantasy baseball geniuses, presented by the Fantasyholics.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Doc and Dog, presented by the Fantasyholics. And today we are starting a new MLB mini-series. We just finished up our team previews, and now we're going to hop into ranking our top 30 starting pitchers. So today we're going to go from 26 to 30, or we're going to do 25 to 30 today, and we'll talk about our first few guys out. So my name is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy. I am here with my co-host Rydawg. And Rydawg, are you excited to start a new series today?
I'm excited to start a new series. I'm excited to talk about our rankings going forwards, and this is going to be a next great couple of weeks of pod of straight up rankings.
Yeah, no, and I think there's a little more excitement with these ones because there's been some rumblings in the past week or so now since the last recording we did that the season's going to be starting at some point. So I think a lot of people are going to be revving up, so I'm excited.
Yeah, and by the time we get all our rankings done, it should end up right a week or so before the baseball season should start. So it lines up perfectly with our schedule as well.
So we'll hop right into it, and before we get, we're going to be doing the top 30 pitchers, but since today this is our first installment, I'm going to mention the first few guys that were left out. These are guys that either I had on my top 30 or Rydawg had on his top 30 and the other didn't. So first few guys out in our consensus. Number 1 was a guy that Rydawg had, number 29, probably one of my first 5 pitchers out, Madison Bumgarner. 9-9 last season, 207 innings pitched, 203 strikeouts, 3.9 ERA, 1.13 WHIP. Numbers that are probably a little below his career average. Next, Carlos Carrasco. He was 28th in my rankings. 30, or you had him ranked outside your top 30. Trevor Bauer was ranked 28th in yours. I had him as my next few out. Zach Gallen I had ranked as my 26th. I'm a lot higher than him, than a lot of people. I think he's a young guy that's up and coming. But any notes you want to make on the first few guys that are out?
Yeah, and I agree. I think Gallen and Carrasco would have been my top 35. They would have been in my next 5 for sure. It's just a tough. Once you got to those 30 to 26, it's a lot harder to rank your true top 30 to 25 than it is to rank your 5 through 1. You know what I mean? It was tough to pick and choose who I wanted in there, but I think I did my rankings based on redraft value. I think that's what we're going with in the most part, though.
Yep, for sure. So we'll start it off with number 30, and this is based on our consensus. We'll break it down a little more based on where we had them individually. Eduardo Rodriguez is number 30. You had him ranked 30th on your list, 27th on mine. Last season he was 19-6, had 203 innings pitched, 213 strikeouts, a 3.81 ERA, and a 1.33 WHIP. He's going to be the Red Sox number 1 starter this year with Chris Sale not playing. I wanted to rank him higher. I really did, just because he's going to be the Red Sox number 1. 19 wins is very impressive last season. His K rate is good. The only thing that really worries me about him is his control in that 1.33 WHIP. I mean, that's very high. So I'm more comfortable having him as my back-end third pitcher rather than my first or second. But, he's going to get wins. He'll get you solid strikeouts. That WHIP is concerning, but as long as you have a strong 1 and 2 guys, I would say he's fine as your third pitcher.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Eduardo has a really high ceiling, I think, and I really don't like pitchers typically pitching in Boston. It's kind of similar in a way to pitching in Baltimore, just because there's so much of a hitter's ballpark. But I think Boston's had better luck with pitchers than Baltimore, obviously. So, Eduardo, 19 wins, that's very, very impressive. And since Sale's going to be out for the remaining of the year and so on, I think taking Eduardo as your second or third pitcher is definitely where he should be being drafted.
Sure. Then, number 29, we have Jose Barrios from the Minnesota Twins. I had him ranked 25th. You actually didn't have him on your rankings, but because I ranked him so high, he comes in at 29 here. Last season, he was 14 and 8, had 200 innings pitched, 195 strikeouts, a 3.68 ERA, and a 1.22 WHIP. He's going to be the Twins' number one guy this season. I like him as a back end second pitcher, high end third pitcher, just because he's on a really good team. You know he's going to get you wins. In a full season, I would be surprised if he touched close to 20, just because I expect the Twins to be a really, really good team.
Right.
You know, the K rate isn't anything impressive, but if he gets you 200 innings, 200 strikeouts, that's solid. The ERA, based on his metrics, should hover right around 3.5. Could work on his whip a little bit. He didn't have a terrible walk rate, but kind of average. So I think he's still young, which is one of the reasons I have him, in that 25 range, because I do think he has some upside to continue to get better. So I have him at 25. He's our 29th consensus.
Yeah, I actually like Barrios a lot. He would have been in my next top 5 if we did a top 35. It was, like I said, it was just so tough picking choosing. There's 30 to 25 guys. It was really picking. It was really tough picking those top 30 to 25 guys. I couldn't decide.
Then number 28 is actually another guy that I had ranked that you didn't. I had him ranked pretty high, much higher than most people do, which is why he comes in at number 28 for us. And that's Dinelson Lamet from the Padres. I have him actually 22nd on my pitchers, which I know is really high. And I always preface this whenever I do rankings is I'm not necessarily saying that I would take him 22nd off with pitchers off the board for me personally, because I think you have to balance your personal rankings with ADP. So if I have Lamet much higher, I'm not necessarily reaching for him. I'm going to kind of wait to take him in his ADP range, but he's a guy that I really like this season. So I have him 28th. He was only 3-5 last year, only pitched 73 innings, had 105 strikeouts in those 73 innings, 4.07 ERA, 1.26 WHIP. And the reason I personally have him so high is his advanced metrics are elite. So when you look at him, it's very comparable to Walker Buehler. Not that I'm saying he's going to make it to that Walker Buehler level, but Lamet's at that age at 27 where a lot of pitchers kind of start to figure it out, or they kind of fade away. So I think Lamet's really starting to put it together, in my opinion. So I have him as a back-end second pitcher. I'd be a lot more comfortable having him as my third pitcher in the league, but I really like his upside this year personally.
Yeah, Lamet's definitely a good player. It's tough being on the Padres. The pitching around him, doesn't really help it too much for me though.
They got your boy Fernando Tatis.
Well, I'm talking about the pitching, though.
He'll have some run support.
That's true. It's true.
Number 27 on our list is Zach Wheeler. I had him 29th. Rydawg had him 24th, and he finishes at 27th in our consensus. He was 11-8 last season, 195 innings pitched, exactly 195 strikeouts. He had a 3.96 ERA, a 1.26 WHIP. He's now with the Philadelphia Phillies. One of the things that kind of worries me about him is he kind of pitches to contact for the most part. That worries me a little bit in Citizens Bank Park. So we'll see how that turns out, but I've seen the upside, and he's shown flashes with the Mets of being a really good second pitcher. So I still think he has that upside. He was top 30 in home runs allowed last season, which is kind of the reason I'm a little concerned about him, but I still think he has that upside. He's 27, 28 right now, so I think he's starting to put it together. And not to mention, he's a guy I'm pretty confident in a full season would get you right around 200 strikeouts, 200 innings. So I just think he offers consistent production for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why when I was ranking him, Wheeler is just a very consistent pitcher. It's for fantasy and real life, actually. He goes out there and he knows what he has to do to get the job done. I wouldn't mind him as my back end third or my third pitcher. I wouldn't mind it at all.
Then number 26, we have Lance Lynn. He was 23rd in my rankings, 27th in Rydawg's, bringing us to the consensus of 26. His record last year was 16-11. He pitched 208 innings. We talked about this in our mini series. 246 strikeouts, which I don't think a lot of people realize. He had a really big season last year. 3.67 ERA, 1.22 WHIP. He's the kind of guy for me. I have him as a back end pitcher too. Realistically, in drafts, he's going right around the 30s, so you can get him as your starting pitcher 3, which I think is awesome for a guy who can get 246 strikeouts for you. They don't have the greatest run support, so I'm not sure if he would get 16 wins again in a full season, but he's once again at that age where I believe he's 31 right now. And there's a lot of guys that put it together in that 27 to 31 years old range. So I think he's once again a guy that's put it together. I wrote an article about a week ago about how I love guys with high strikeout rates. So I like Lance Lynn. I'll take 246 strikeouts all day.
Yeah, I completely agree. He had a quiet stud year last year, actually. 16 wins, 3.6 ERA, and 240 strikeouts. Those are very, very solid numbers. Give me that any day. I'll take him as my third pitcher for sure if he falls to the right place.
And then we will end it, ironically, with your boy Mike Soroka at number 25 in our consensus rankings, pitcher from the Atlanta Braves. I had him ranked 27th. You have him ranked 21st. Last season, he was 13-4, had 174 innings pitched, only 142 strikeouts, a 2.68 ERA, and a 1.11 WHIP. And I'll let you take this one away.
Oh, gee, thanks. I expect the strikeouts to come up a little bit if it was a full season, of course. I would expect him to pitch 200 innings in a full season. I wouldn't expect over 200 strikeouts, though. I'd expect maybe into 160, 170 range. I think his ERA would stay in the low 3s to high 2s. I think his wins would come up a little bit, which is why I have him ranked 21st. I think the Braves, in general, could be in a very, very tough spot in finishing for that second place in the NL East. And I think Mike Soroka could definitely get 16 wins easily with a full season.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. I mean, I think his ceiling is kind of that Zach Greinke range. I think that would be optimistic for his career. I mean, he has great control, and he's still super young. So I personally like him a lot more in dynasty leagues as a stash. Sure. Just because short term, he's going to have bumps in the road just being as young as he is. So I expect him to more be in like the mid 3s. 200 innings in a full season would be completely realistic. I agree with that 160 strikeout range. To me, I said I like the guys that give me a high K rate. If you do take Soroka, I think you just have to be more strategic. He's a guy that I think who's going to, throughout the course of his career, is going to have a really nice whip because of his control. So, you're taking a lower whip, less strikeouts. So maybe later in the draft, you take a guy like Matthew Boyd, comes to mind from the Tigers, a guy that had 230 plus strikeouts last year, but his whip wasn't great. I think there's ways that you can balance out your draft. And I think if you take Soroka, that's really the key there, is making sure you have a balanced pitching staff.
Oh, yeah, and we talked about that throughout our mini series. If you take these guys like that don't have high strikeouts and but get you a really good ERA, you can get strikeouts in the later rounds. We've mentioned it before. You mentioned Matthew Boyd. I'll mention two more. I believe Lance Lynn's going later in drafts as well as Trevor Bauer. And those guys are all guys that finished with, I believe, 240 strikeouts. Well, Boyd had 230 strikeouts last year, I believe, right?
Yep.
I know Bauer and Lance Lynn both had over 240. So there's where it balances out right there. And I think if you take Mike Soroka, I think the Zach Greinke comparison's really ideal, actually, because you think about they're both not strikeout guys, but they're both guys that have just master control at such a young age of their command. I don't see Mike Soroka. I wouldn't say falling. I mean, what he did last year is very, very intense and insane. I would see a little regression in a way, but it's not going to be crazy regression to the point where he's going to get sent down. He's going to have a couple of years in the 3 ERAs. But, I mean, the way he commands his control at such a young age, it's actually really impressive because you said, and with a couple guys, most pitchers don't really reach that command until they're 27 to 30 range. So – the way he mastered at such a young age, it's very nice to see.
I agree. So that's all that we're going to talk about today. That was our rankings from 25 to 30. Next episode, we'll be doing 19 through 24. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. If you don't already, subscribe to the Fantasy Holics on YouTube. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. And we have our new website, thefantasyholics.com. So we will see you for the next installment.
Bye-bye.